Before we begin, I will go over the emergency response plan for this room. In an emergency, everyone must evacuate through the nearest safe exit. Those seated in the gallery take direction from security to evacuate. Council takes direction from the meeting clerk. After evacuating the room, please proceed to a stairwell. Take the stairs to ground level and evacuate the building through the doors marked emergency exit and go to the muster point. Do not take an elevator or walk through the city room. Anyone with limited mobility should identify themselves to security or the meeting clerk during an evacuation. And finally, please speak with security or a meeting clerk if you require first aid. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order with a land acknowledgement and roll call. I will note that we meet on the traditional land of Treaty 6 territory and Métis homeland and acknowledge the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as the Cree, Dene Soto, Blackfoot, Nakota Iska, as well as Métis and Inuit, and now settlers from around the world. We will start with a roll call. Councillor Wright.
Good morning.
And Councillor Knack.
Good morning.
Councillor Rice.
Good morning.
And myself, Mayor Sohi. Mayor Sohi's not here. Okay, and are there any other council members joining us online if you want to signify?
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Tang. I think that's it. Okay, declaration of pecuniary or conflict of interest. Does anyone have a pecuniary or conflict of interest to declare? Okay, hearing none. Clerk, am I required to read the full preamble, or is that sufficient?
If you could read the preamble, that would be great to get
Sounds
us
good.
in the groove of things.
Before we this is new. Before we consider today's agenda, I will ask all members of council present if they have any pecuniary or conflicts of interest to declare regarding any of the items to be discussed. A pecuniary interest exists when an item could monetarily affect a member of council, their employer, or a family member. A conflict of interest exists when an item could affect a private interest of a member of council, their employer, or a family member. Do any members of council have a pecuniary or conflict of interest to declare? Hearing none, I will move with adoption of the agenda. So, we have the two reports. Are there any other changes, additions, deletions? Hearing none. Councillor Wright.
I move adoption of the agenda.
Okay. All in favor, please vote.
I'm a yes.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Just missing one vote. Councillor Jans, did it come through for you?
It has now. Yep, I'm a yes.
Thank you. We have all the votes.
Okay. Approval of the minutes. Any changes, errors, omissions, deletions? Hearing none. Councillor Wright.
I move approval of the minutes from the August 12th, 2025 Urban Planning Committee meeting.
Okay. Any questions? Please call the vote.
I'm a yes.
Thank you, Councillor Knack.
Excellent. Thank you.
We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. Okay, that's carried unanimously as well. Protocol items, I'm not aware of any. Select items for debate. Councillor Wright.
I'd like to select 7-1, please.
And I would like to select 7-2. So that's everything. We can move straight to requests to speak, right, Clerk?
Yes.
There's no further items. Yep. Okay, so requests to speak. We've got a number of speakers for this morning on item 7.1. We have Yolanda Liu Stantec. And on item 7.2, we have Laurie Chandler, Angela Boone, Pooja Rajamohan, Stephen Beaton, Andre Santos, Andrea Freitas, and Parm Jahal. Are there any other speakers who came through? No. I'd take a motion to hear from those speakers. Councillor Wright?
So moved.
Okay, any questions? Hearing none, please call the vote.
I'm a yes.
Thank you. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. Okay, that is carried unanimously. Thank you. So, I'm not aware of any time specifics on the agenda, councillor inquiries or reports to be dealt with at a different meeting, no requests to reschedule reports, and no unfinished business. So that brings us to item 7.1. Would administration have a presentation or? Yep. Please proceed.
Yes. Good morning. I'm Shauna Kuiper, Director of Planning Coordination, and we are here to request the authorization of a new neighborhood structure plan for the Snowberry neighborhood within the Dakota Area Structure Plan. Andrew McClellan, Senior Planner of Planning Coordination, will provide a presentation, and then we will be available for any questions that you may have. Next slide, please.
Thank you. Located in the developing area of Dakota in southeast Edmonton, the plan area is approximately 385 hectares in size. The neighborhood is bounded by 25th Avenue southwest to the north, 17th Street southwest to the east, 41st Avenue southwest to the south, and 50th Street southwest to the west. Next slide, please. The planning and development process starts with the city's strategic plans, more specifically the city plan. Under the city plan, council's authorization is required prior to the preparation of any new statutory plan. This is where we are today. The Dakota Area Structure Plan is in effect for this area and anticipated 5 NSPs to guide growth. Alces and Meltwater are approved NSPs, and Snowberry is the logical next neighborhood to prepare for future development in the ASP plan area. Further down the development continuum, if the NSP is adopted, it will then inform future rezonings and subdivisions within the neighborhood. The future NSP is required to align with city standards for planning new communities, which include 12 outcomes such as ensuring neighborhoods are connected, cost-effective, safe, secure, unique, inviting, inclusive, flexible, and adaptable. Broadly speaking, the plan will be required to designate the type and location of land uses, define a design vision, establish a mobility network, identify the location, size, and configuration of schools, parks, open space systems, and natural areas, and provide general servicing schemes and a staging pattern for development. A new neighborhood structure plan for this area supports the city plan by helping to accommodate an additional 1 million people within Edmonton's existing boundaries, and contributes to the big city move, a community of communities, by providing a variety of land uses that will allow residents to meet their daily needs within a 15-minute walk, bike, or transit ride from where they live. Next slide, please. Administration supports the authorization to prepare the Snowberry NSP. Should council provide authorization, the applicant will prepare the NSP and submit an application. Administration will then undertake the typical process for land use change, which includes technical review, public engagement, and ensuring alignment with policy. Once administration has completed its analysis of the application and conducted public engagement, a bylaw and planning report will be brought to a public hearing. Edmontonians will have the opportunity to provide feedback directly to council should they wish to speak at the public hearing, and council will ultimately decide whether the NSP is adopted. Next slide, please. Thank you. We would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to questions of, we'll now go to speaker from the public. I will welcome Yolanda Liu.
I'm just wondering if the speaker, I didn't have any questions for her. Did you have a presentation or questions only? Okay, so I think we can pass on that then, if that's okay.
Is that okay? Yep, I'm seeing nods. Okay, so we'll then move to questions of administration.
Yes, thank you
Okay,
very much.
excellent.
So, I know that we're just sort of in the early stages here, but I guess my concern surrounds the rural residential area just to the north of 28th Avenue. Will they be engaged in that public engagement? Because I don't think that, I'm just worried that that sort of the one pocket of rural residential could have the potential to end up like Wernerville or the other item that we had at public hearing in around the White Mud Ravine.
Councillor, yeah, the public engagement will include the plan area and surrounding areas, so they can certainly participate. It is outside of this particular NSP. Within the Dakota ASP, it does recognize the existing country residential. There's direction in the area structure plan for how to provide future servicing and allow those landowners to transition over time, but most of that will be dealt with through the NSP planning process for the Dakota NSP, which has not yet come forward.
Okay, and but they will be included, I'm just wondering, like radius, distance-wise?
They would be included.
All of the or just the ones just abutting 28th Ave Southwest?
We'd have to look at the measurements, but we can vary the distances that we engage, so it's always something that we can consider.
Do you need a motion for that, or will that be done?
I don't think we need a motion, though.
Okay. Okay. That's actually all I have then. Thank you.
All right. Done with admin. No questions of the speaker. I'll look to the board. Councillor Tang.
Great, thank you. How long did you say it typically takes to prepare a plan to get to that fifth bubble, the development stage?
Councillor, approximately 2+ years.
Okay. And then I guess I'm wondering, so I'm wondering about transportation and traffic planning as part of this stage. Or if you can clarify at what stage does that really come in? There is increasing pressure along 50th Street and 41st Avenue, particularly coming in and out of Beaumont, for example. I'm wondering how will this next stage of planning for this part of the Southeast accommodate that and take that into consideration?
So, Councillor, the area structure plan has some high-level details about the transportation network, but definitely through the creation of the NSP, that will be very high importance to focus on, and that will be something that we'll be reviewing with our engineers and working with the applicant to make sure any existing issues and anticipating future issues are addressed through the NSP.
And so perhaps not right away, but as you move through the stages of planning, for example, I guess I'm specifically thinking about upgrade to 50th Street, which I think badly needs some type of consideration there. I guess just on that timeline that you shared, I think this is slide 3. I guess I'm wondering at what point we'll get a bit more detail.
Councillor, any upgrades to the surrounding road network won't occur until subdivisions occur. So that
Okay.
is further down the planning process. Right now, we're seeking the authorization of the NSP. So the NSP will plan out the network, plan out the improvements. Then we go into rezoning and then the subdivision. And the subdivisions are conditioned with the improvements to the surrounding road network, which in terms of a planning phase, we don't expect any new development or rooftops to occur for the next 3 to 5 years here.
Okay, so nothing that might impact the surrounding infrastructure until 3 to 5 years. Okay, and then just in terms of the public engagement, I see that there's a lot of landowner and one-on-one meetings happening. Will residents, say on the other side of 50th Street, that's just adjacent, be told about this opportunity or have the opportunity for input?
Yes, there'll be plenty of opportunities for input from people in the surrounding neighborhoods, including the other side of 50th Street. The exact nature of the public engagement strategy will be figured out as the application progresses, but certainly with something that's significant, we would take a very in-depth approach to engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, even just some of the planning work and the infrastructure servicing work around that area, not this particular, because it's not there yet, but it has pretty significant impact on neighborhoods west of 50th Street as well. And then finally, I'm just wondering in the last 4 years, because I feel like this is the first time I'm seeing how many of plans like this have we authorized in terms of developing of a new neighborhood?
Councillor, UPC has authorized the progression of district plans, West 240, and most recently an industrial ASP in the Rabbit Hill area. So this isn't the first time that administration has sought authorization of a new plan.
Okay, a new NSP.
NSP, yep, or yeah. I think
Okay.
the one in Rabbit Hill is actually an ASP, but that's okay.
Okay, great, thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
I would just like to move that Urban Planning Committee recommend to City Council that a new statutory plan be prepared for land generally bounded by 25th Avenue Southwest to the north, 17th Street Southwest to the east, 41st Avenue Southwest to the south, and 50th Street Southwest to the west.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to introduce, sir?
No.
No? Okay, stands as is. So we have the motion on the floor. Any questions? Anyone?
Yes,
Oh,
yes. One question. I'm still signing in from
okay,
his.
Councilor Rice.
Yes, thank you very much. Sorry. So my question is about from 41st Southwest to the south. What's his boundary and for the south? Is it Highway 19 or is there anything? And also for the 41st, because 41st Avenue is a long road, and from Highway 2 to 170th Street is covered that entire portion from 41st Avenue South and to the Highway 2 boundary, or what's the boundary specific for that piece?
Councillor, are you asking what the boundary of the city of Edmonton is?
No, I'm asking the boundary for this statutory covered, and then one portion mentioned here about the 41st Avenue Southwest to the south.
Councillor, the boundaries for this new neighborhood plan would be 25th Avenue Southwest to the north, 17th Street Southwest to the east, 41st Avenue Southwest to the south, and 50th Street Southwest to the west.
I know I can see that on the screen, but my question is specifically, and when we say 41st Avenue Southwest to the south, and then what is boundary for that? And because the south boundary for our city is the Highway 19, is to the Highway 19, do we need a specific for that, or is it just vague to the south? I want to be very clear.
So for this plan area, it would be 41st Avenue. There are future growth areas that are further south than that, but they're not being contemplated for development at this time.
So this scope, I'm sorry, I'm really confused for this. And 41st Avenue Southwest to the south is not clear to me which area you specifically cover. I want to be very clear. And then is beyond 41st Avenue to South Highway 19 for that entire area.
So
Can you confirm that? And because this is to the south, or only 41st Avenue, if we look at 41st Avenue, there are north side and the south side. And my question is this specific talk about the area beyond the 41st Avenue South to the Highway 19?
No, so this is the limit, would be 41st Avenue. I think maybe the wording, you're interpreting it as meaning 41st Avenue and further south, but that's not the case. Yeah. It's just saying that the south boundary is 41st Avenue.
The south boundary is...
it's the south boundary, yeah.
So then what is the reason why it's not included beyond the 41st Avenue?
That would be outside of the area structure plan area and also in the future growth area that is.
So that's not part of this, is not part of this stature of this structure area.
Correct.
Okay, so that's helpful. So it's not part of this structure area. So it's different structure area, which is Robert Hill. And it's my understanding, that's right.
It's a future growth area that is not being brought forward in any way right now. There's been no planning done.
But that is under the different district.
It would become under different plans at some point in the future, but those are not being brought forward for authorization. Those are not being explored at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? We have a motion on the floor. Councilor Wright, do you want to close or speak to it?
I will just, I guess I will just close and thank you very much for continuing to help our city grow as far down as 41st Avenue Southwest. I think we've also looked at substantial completion and sort of restricting any further growth south of 41st Avenue. And I think that is considered as future growth areas. So Thank you very much. Look forward to the engagement that will be done with the public as well as we proceed with continued approvals. Thank you.
All right, please call the vote. I'm in favor.
We're just missing one vote. Councillor Rice, did it come through for you?
Oh, I was wondering because I asked the question, I was signing for speaking, and then all of a sudden the chair called the close speaking. I didn't get the opportunity to speak. It's not come to my screen. Okay, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, on to item 7.2, short-term rental regulations. Administration, do you have a presentation to begin?
We do. We just have a shift change here.
Okay, no worries.
Good morning. My name is Lila Peter, and I am the Director of Development Approvals and Inspections within the Urban Planning and Economy. And I am joined today with Travis Pollock, the Branch Manager of Development Services, along with other members of administration. Next slide, please. At the April 23rd, 2024 City Council meeting, City Council passed a motion directing administration to bring back a report on the current state of municipal and provincial regulations for short-term rentals, or STRs, including licensing, zoning, taxation, and other regulatory models with options or recommendations for further programming or bylaw amendments. The second part of the motion was to bring back amendments to the business license bylaw, requiring the licensee to remain on the premise while the business is operating. The motion reflected concerns regarding nuisances such as garbage, excessive noise, and house parties, as well as potential impacts on housing affordability from short-term rentals. Presented to you today are potential bylaw amendments and alternative options to further regulate short-term rentals. And to inform this work, administration conducted public opinion research on short-term rentals and completed a jurisdictional scan of other Canadian municipalities, the results of which are also included in this report. Next slide, please. Administration also worked with a consultant to conduct public opinion research with several interested parties to understand their experiences, including short-term rental operators, short-term rental users, long-term residents who live near a short-term rental, and the general public. The detailed findings are found in attachment 1 of the report, but I'd like to highlight some of the key insights. First, public perception of short-term rentals is not necessarily based on lived experience. Concerns among neighbors were primarily driven by media reports of extreme cases that occurred elsewhere. This has created a scenario of fear or distrust of the unknown as it relates to STRs. This was contrasted by the lived experience in Edmonton. Very few neighbors of STRs identified having experienced any concerns. Of those who did, most concerns were rare and centered around things such as an illegally parked vehicle and, on occasion, noise. And some neighbors noted that problems caused by long-term residents could be potentially more bothersome and harder to deal with. Questions relating to the availability of short-term rentals highlighted that visitors and residents needing temporary accommodation generally prefer STRs and would be less likely to book an STR if the operator was to remain on the premise. Operators also stated that they believe STRs provide a vital accommodation option to meet the varying needs of the public. Next slide, please. In preparing this report, administration took a number of steps to understand and validate the concerns that are often associated with STRs in Edmonton. Internal data on property complaints received by Community Standards and Neighborhoods in 2024 identified that there were 98 non-business license investigation complaints where the complainant mentioned an STR. This is 98 short-term rental complaints out of approximately 29,000. This amounts to about 0.34% of complaints. Next slide, please. Over the last year and a half, administration has been working directly with Airbnb, a principal platform provider for STRs, to address some of the concerns regarding lack of compliance with licensing. Airbnb voluntarily introduced a dedicated Edmonton page for hosts and a mandatory field to input a business license number. This mandatory license field has increased the number of licensed short-term rentals by 70% between May 2024 and June 2025. The business licensing team is now receiving multiple new applications each week. As of September 4th, there are 1,810 business licenses in this category, which is compared to 1,085 in May of 2024. There have also been discussions with VRBO, but VRBO has identified that they would prefer to see regulations in the bylaw prior to making changes to their own platform. VRBO is another principal player in the rental market. VRBO has also put measures in place to mitigate community disturbances, and administration continues to engage directly with VRBO to explore opportunities to increase overall compliance with hosts. Next slide, please. The business licensing team also explored zoning and taxation as other potential tools to further regulate short-term rentals. However, within Edmonton's context, concerns largely related to behavioral issues which are not appropriately addressed through zoning or taxation regulation. So from a land use perspective, short-term rentals are considered to have the same impacts as a residential activity, which is similar to other living arrangements. And developing regulations to address concerns with short-term rentals under the zoning bylaw is challenging, as it is difficult to identify different land use impacts that occur as a result of tenure. And looking at taxation, the city does not have a reliable means of tracking the use of a property for short-term rental that would allow for an accurate time and space calculation of non-residential taxes. A residential subclass could be used to mimic non-residential taxes based solely on licensing. However, this would still not differentiate between exclusive use and intermittent use of a property for short-term rental. And in either case, outcomes would include inequity in the amount of taxes paid by a short-term rental operator, along with potential movement of the short-term rental market underground to avoid paying higher taxes. And increasing taxes in and of itself would likely not have any impact on behavioral concerns occasionally associated with short-term rentals. There is a lack of available data on the impact of STRs on housing affordability and the housing market in Edmonton. Further research would be recommended before considering changes to understand how short-term rentals add to the vacancy rate, potential rent price increases, or while also contributing to supporting short-term housing opportunities. Next slide, please. So the motion called for administration to provide a report that included amendments to the bylaw requiring hosts to remain on premise while operating the business. A markup showing these amendments is found in attachment 3. Evidentiary requirements of MEOs, or municipal enforcement officers, to enforce this regulation would require continual monitoring of the property, which would be limited by legal requirements and could not proceed without advance notice to enter the property, occupant consent, or judicial authorization. There is a risk that the proposed bylaw amendment could create such a high barrier to the industry and lead to further non-compliance, in effect driving this industry underground. Administration does not recommend these amendments or any further regulations of short-term rentals at this time. This is because administration found no evidence to support that additional regulation may result in effective or positive outcomes, and the requirement for the host to be on premise while operating the business is unenforceable in practice at a municipal level. Next slide, please. The motion asked administration to bring forward other options for consideration. 2 alternative options are provided should council wish to pursue these regulations. Option 2 would introduce a new category to require digital platforms such as Airbnb or Vrbo to obtain a business license. This would include operating requirements such as requiring hosts to enter their business number to advertise on the platforms, implementing control measures to discourage parties, such as limiting same-day bookings, providing a reporting mechanism for complaints, and delisting properties when a host business license is suspended or cancelled. This option creates significant enforcement challenges and has not been thoroughly tested in other jurisdictions. Option 3 is a 3 strikes rule for recurring disturbances. Under this option, administration could suspend a host business license after receiving confirmation from Edmonton Police Service of 3 serious disturbances. These disturbances could include things like the noise bylaw violations, house parties, or open drug and alcohol use. For this option to work, administration and EPS would need to regularly exchange licensing and complaint information. Any suspension or imposition of conditions on the license would be appealable to the Community Standards and License Appeal Committee, CSLAC. Preliminary discussions with EPS have begun, but it remains unclear if the data would be useful in achieving the desired outcomes. There are also privacy considerations that have to be undertaken with this option. Bylaw amendments have not been prepared for these options. If council would like to further regulate short-term rentals, a motion would be required for administration to return with bylaw amendments for consideration by council. Next slide, please. So if this report is received for information, no bylaw amendment will move forward. While no bylaw amendments would be advanced, administration continues to explore opportunities for short-term rentals. A number of next steps are planned independent of this report. Administration will continue to advance its collaborative working relationship with the short-term rental platforms, including leveraging community disturbance mitigation tools to help quickly address disturbances when they occur. Administration will also undertake a public education campaign using existing resources to dispel myths and fears about STRs, explain short-term rental regulations and host responsibilities, and provide guidance for Edmontonians who have concerns about a short-term rental in their community. Administration is also exploring enforcement opportunities as it relates to development permit permissions and use operations. This program will be supported by work being undertaken to improve connections between development permits and business licensing, so as to improve compliance on these properties where rentals may be occurring. And this will incorporate messaging and reminders into our online self-serve application portal to help raise awareness of licensing needs. Next slide, please. This concludes our presentation, and we are pleased to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much. We may go to speakers of the public now. I'll just, clerk, I'm just going to call their names and see if they're with us, and then we can go to the speakers. Is that sufficient?
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay, it's still the list I have here, or are there new ones?
The list you have there is still current.
Perfect. Okay, Lori Chandler, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Excellent, thank you. Angela Boone, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Pooja Rajamohan,
I am.
and sorry, could you correct me? How do I say your name?
Sure, it's Pooja Rajmohan.
Pooja Rajamohan. Thank you. Stephen Beaton.
I am here. Good morning.
Andre Santos.
I am here.
Andrea Freitas. And Andrea Freitas. Okay, we'll try again. And Parm Jahal.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll begin with Lori Chandler. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It's lovely to be here today to be able to speak to you on this very important topic. The Alberta Hotel and Lodging Association and our 80 taxpaying members in Edmonton are deeply disappointed with the city administration's report recommending against regulating commercial short-term rentals. Since 2018, the AHLA has urged the city to create a regulatory framework that protects residents and housing while ensuring a fair marketplace. Instead, administration's report ignores these concerns and takes its direction from the biggest beneficiary of doing nothing, Airbnb. After consulting only with Airbnb, short-term rental operators, and realtors, administration concluded no further regulation is required. Hotels recognize that short-term rentals are a part of Edmonton's tourism ecosystem, but if our advocacy is seen as a conflict of interest, the same must be true of Airbnb and realtors, who profit every single night the city goes without rules. Why are their views solicited while ours are dismissed? With respect, this report is flawed, biased, and incomplete. For years, the city has been talking about housing affordability and availability, yet here administration willfully ignores the impact of commercial short-term rentals on both Edmonton's housing stock and its legitimate businesses. Let's be clear, short-term rentals are not the only cause of our housing crisis, but they certainly are, turning homes and condos that were built for people who live and work here into ghost hotels, creating a revolving door of transient visitors in residential neighborhoods and condominiums, inflating housing costs by cannibalizing Edmonton's supply, undermining tourism investment by businesses that employ Edmontonians and pay commercial property taxes. And they are gaming the property tax system by paying residential rates on commercial enterprises. And the evidence backs this up. Research from the School of Urban Planning at McGill University found that in summer 2024, there were 2,210 short-term rental listings in Edmonton. Over 1,000 of those were whole homes operating as permanent short-term rentals. Between 2017 and 2022, renters in Edmonton paid $105 million more in rent because of those short-term rentals. From August 2022 to 2024, Edmonton's commercial short-term rental market grew 44%. In 2024 alone, short-term rentals earned $58 million in Edmonton. The top 10% of hosts took 54% of that revenue, and just 91 operators captured 21% of it. This is not mom and pop home sharing. This is big business, and every Edmonton taxpayer is subsidizing it. Ryan LLC, a global tax services firm, confirmed this. Under the current tax framework, short-term rentals represent up to $14.6 million in residential tax revenue. If taxed at the non-residential rate, that figure would jump to $40.9 million. As we have said every time this issue has come before you, Edmonton hotels are not concerned about people renting out a room in their home or a suite above their garage. We are opposed to corporations and individuals buying up multiple properties and running them like hotels, without the same health and safety rules, employment standards, or tax obligations legitimate operators face. Other cities across Canada and around the world have recognized the impact of leaving commercial short-term rentals unregulated. So why is this administration recommending that council hold off until the problem gets bigger? Because Airbnb said so? Today, I urge you to reject the recommendation to do nothing. Instead, move forward with bylaw changes that limit short-term rentals to an owner's principal residence. Jurisdictions with this rule have seen an immediate increase in long-term housing. It also increases host accountability, reducing disruptions and criminal activities such as human trafficking and ghost hotels. Further, hold platforms like Airbnb legally responsible for host compliance. And finally, require platforms to share their data so the city can actually enforce the rules. These are standard, effective tools that restore housing and safety. They are working in cities across Canada and around the world, and it's time for Edmonton to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next guest is Angela Boone. You have 5
Councillors,
minutes. Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Angela Boone, and I'm the Director of Member Services at Edmonton Destination Marketing Hotels. EDMH members represent more than 50 hotels in Edmonton. These businesses provide over 8,000 direct and indirect jobs in our city. We remit over $45 million in taxes to the city annually. We contribute to the city's tourism infrastructure and to the community and the tourism ecosystem as a whole, all while ensuring visitors leave with a positive memory of Edmonton. At EDMH and in our member hotels, we welcome competition. We compete with each other every day to attract guests through different marketing strategies, guest experiences, and amenities. We welcome competition within a fair and level landscape, and today the playing field between regulated hotels and commercial short-term rentals is not level. The issue is full-time investor-run lodging operated out of residential properties that are essentially hotel offerings without commercial hotel rules, standards, health and safety measures, and taxation. In Edmonton, short-term rentals have grown significantly in recent years. And when you look at the data, it's not because of the average homeowner renting out an extra bedroom. A recent report from the Alberta Hotel and Lodging Association found that during the summer of 2024, an estimated 2,200 listings were active in Edmonton, 77% of which were entire homes. That's over 1,000 housing units removed from the long-term market at a time when Edmonton is facing a housing crunch. The tax gap is just as troubling. As the city struggles to maintain services while attempting to minimize tax increases, commercial short-term rentals operate their businesses in residential properties, paying residential tax rates. This offers a considerable tax advantage. Independent analysis estimated that the short-term rental inventory represented $681.7 million in assessed value. At residential tax rates, that brings in $7.4 million annually. At commercial rates, it would be $19.3 million. That's nearly $12 million left on the table every year, dollars that could fund essential city services. When hotels face higher taxation, stricter zoning, stronger health and safety and employment standards, it discourages investment in new hotels. Instead, we see capital flow into residential properties operating as unregulated hotels, taking housing away from residents, raising rents, and widening the tax gap. Getting us to a level playing field in lodging doesn't require us to reinvent the wheel. Across Canada, other municipalities have adopted policies that have returned housing to residents and restored fairness in the marketplace. There are proven tools that balance tourism with housing needs. On behalf of EDMH and our member hotels, we are asking that this committee take the time to conduct more analysis on short-term rentals, take administration's recommendation and say no additional regulation is needed means we go down a path where short-term rentals don't stay at the homeowner level. They will scale. If hotel-like operations can run out of residentially assessed properties with lighter compliance, we invite large entities to assemble portfolios into de facto hotels. That compounds today's harms. More homes permanently removed from the long-term rental pool, upward pressure on rents, and a widening tax gap as commercial activity pays residential rates. EDMH members were extremely frustrated and disappointed to see that this report presented included no consultation with hoteliers, and we question whether a sound decision can be made without proper input from our industry. Thank you for giving me the time to express the concerns of our members.
Thank you very much. Next is Pooja Rajamohan.
Good morning, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. So I'm just going to build on what Angela said, because what I'm going to say is from the perspective of the Western Edmonton, and we are a member of the EDMH. So as far as the short-term rentals are concerned, what I'm going to say is how it has impacted us in the recent past and in the past couple of years. The first is the price pressure. The short-term rentals often offer lower rates, and this is for the businesses that are coming in with larger volumes and for longer stay groups. As a hotel ourselves, we saw over 700 to 800 room nights that were lost in the month of July, which is a tough month for the hotels, lose out to Airbnb, and only a limited portion that came in to the hotel. So that's a significant revenue loss, which then actually has a dominoes effect on the staffing, and our associates are not getting enough hours. The rentals can also offer more flexible check-in, check-out timing, and also the kitchen access that many hotels may really struggle to offer. Not to mention the loss of market share. The business travelers or families that are staying in longer may opt in for rentals with amenities such as laundry or full-time, kitchen. While we welcome competition, but that would be done rightly if the playing fields are leveled, which in this case they aren't. Obviously, with reduced occupancy rates, the number of growing rentals can dilute the demand in all seasons. It also has an operational pressure on our staffing adjustments. Lower occupancies could lead to reduced staffing or shift in the service models. It's an uneven playing field for the hotels, because with licensing, hotels face much stricter regulations. For example, the fire codes or the pools and accessibility standards, where short-term rentals sometimes are not held to those standards. More importantly, if I talk about the dollar value to the city, it would be interesting for everyone to note that our property tax in the period of past 7 years has gone down by 50%, and that shows a decrease in the value of the property, which in turn is tax dollars to the city. So that does impact as well on bringing in the revenue. Importantly, what we need to understand is Edmonton as a market, and I'm saying this from a sales and marketing hat, is a 59% market. A 70% increase in the Airbnb, if that happens, investments into the hotels from an owner perspective may not be very lucrative anymore. And that has an impact which we may not be able to see short term, but can have a longer term impact on not getting the right business for the city, which EDMH and Explore Edmonton is all set for. So thank you.
Hello. Okay, thank you. Next is Stephen Beaton.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on an issue that is reshaping our city's hospitality landscape and housing market: the growing tension between short-term rentals and traditional hotel accommodations. As board chair for Edmonton Destination Marketing Hotels, I'm here to represent our 53-member hotels and echo statements already made by Lori, Angela, and Pooja. I can tell you we were disappointed to find out that an external audit was conducted on this subject, but no hotels were consulted with to share our views on this matter. Would we not be a group that is impacted by short-term rentals? Over the past decade, platforms like Airbnb and VRBO have transformed how visitors experience our city. While they offer flexibility and affordability, they also raise critical questions about fairness, accountability, and long-term sustainability. Let me begin with occupancy and economic impact. Hotels in Edmonton, year-to-date through June 2025, are maintaining occupancy rates around 60%, supported by professional staff, insurance, and compliance with safety regulations, while short-term rentals average closer to 55% occupancy, and they often operate without the same oversight, creating this what some have called ghost hotels, commercial operations embedded in residential zones flying under the radar. This disparity affects not only the hotel industry, but also our housing market. Investors purchasing homes solely for short-term rental use reduce the stock of long-term housing, driving up prices and rents. In some neighborhoods, this has led to displacement and gentrification. Edmonton's own urban planning committee acknowledged this concern by noting that while nuisance complaints are low, around 0.3% of total bylaw complaints, the broader impact of housing availability and neighborhood cohesion is significant. Hotels are held to a higher standard. We pay commercial taxes, employ local workers, many of which are new Canadians or minorities. We maintain high levels of cleanliness and sanitation, promote safety and security, and contribute to our tourism infrastructure. Our hotels are monitored closely by both city fire inspectors and the overall city health inspectors for the province. STR operators, on the other hand, often avoid these obligations. As Councillor Jans rightly pointed out, purpose-built Airbnb-style renters should be zoned and taxed as commercial hotels. We must also consider accountability and enforcement. The Alberta Hotel and Lodging Association has called for platforms to share data with municipalities to ensure compliance. Without this transparency, enforcement becomes nearly impossible. Vancouver's experience shows that fraudulent license numbers and unverified listings are common when cities lack the tools to validate STR operations. So what can we do? Require business license for all STR operators, as Edmonton has begun to do. Enforce zoning laws to distinguish between residential and commercial use. Implement a clear tax model that ensures STRs contribute fairly to city revenues and that corporation-owned units are paying commercial tax rates, not residential. Engage platforms directly to share data and support enforcement, and ideally limit rentals to principal residents to prevent commercial conversion of housing stock. This is not about eliminating short-term rentals. It's about creating a level playing field, one that protects our housing supply, supports our hotel and tourism industry, and ensures neighborhoods remain places to live, not just places to stay. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker is Andre Santos. Andre?
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. I represent a large number of residents, 20 plus, from the Summerside community. Just to start, residents do not feel safe reporting problematic short-term rentals. There's no clear or accessible way to file complaints, especially combined complaints for a specific STR through 111. And the Edmonton Police Service lacks the capacity to respond to non-emergency but persistent issues stemming from short-term rentals. This leaves the community feeling helpless and unsupported as they face escalating disruptions and leaving us to do a lot of paperwork between Airbnb, VRBO, and the city. In our particular neighborhood, we've identified a boarding house operating in our neighborhood that advertises at least 7 individual units for nightly rental as low as $41 a night, clearly functioning as a short-term rental business. This setup violates existing zoning bylaws, yet attempts to address the issue with the city have led to confusion and deflection. Despite this apparent non-compliance, we've been informed that the property owner has somehow obtained a business license for 8 single suites. No department has been able to explain how this was approved. The Development Compliance Office is unable to provide answers. Bylaw Services refers us to Development Compliance. Development Compliance insists Airbnb-related concerns fall under bylaw jurisdiction. Municipal enforcement offers no clarity or resolution. This circular figure pointing highlights a serious gap in the city's regulatory framework and provides excessive frustration for residents. The city urgently needs a clear and enforceable regulatory scheme for short-term rentals like Airbnb. This should include defined limits on the number of units allowed in a single-family residence, transparent licensing criteria, coordinated oversight between business licensing, development compliance, and municipal enforcement. Without proper regulation, neighborhoods are left vulnerable to commercial operations that skirt the rules and erode community stability. The lack of oversight is transforming once safe, vibrant communities into unstable environments. Residents are now encountering drug paraphernalia discarded in public spaces, a revolving door of transient individuals, some of whom appear to be engaging in criminal activity, a growing sense of unease, especially for families with children who no longer feel safe in their own neighborhood. Airbnb rentals must be subject to the same visibility and standards as other commercial rentals and hotels. Residents deserve to know when short-term rentals are operating nearby and to feel safe reporting violations without fear of retaliation from neighbors and larger corporations purchasing homes. Please consider more regulations, provide more resources for residents, hold homeowners and companies accountable, especially when they have no vested interest in the long-term health of our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Andrea, call again.
Hi, I was able to join. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you have 5 minutes.
Great, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak as well. I'm speaking on behalf of 20 neighbors similar to Andre Santos, who spoke above me, and I echo a lot of the concerns that Andre brought forward, as well as the concerns brought forward by the hotel businesses. And unfortunately, we've been put in a position in our neighborhood where this type of short-term rental and Airbnb has eroded the safety of both the individual residence, which is intended to be a single family residence, not a mini hotel, and unfortunately the community in allowing unsafe behavior by residents, by the rental tenants. There's also been a gross lack of accountability by both bylaw, developmental compliance, and Airbnb for this particular rental, and I cannot imagine that we are the only people in this situation with respect to neighborhood developments of these short-term rental businesses. And this unfortunately also seems to be filling a gap in an unsafe way with respect to affordable housing that really should be regulated by the city, and the city should be responsible for in providing regulated and supervised housing development. And overall in our experience, we've just found that city bylaw and developmental compliance has not demonstrated accountability in providing transparency in how these short-term rentals are set up, and that the communities they are going up in are not being made aware of the changes on their very own streets. And I again would echo that there needs to be strict compliance with respect to allowing these businesses to operate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Parm Jahal. Parm?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm also, as a homeowner, taxpayer, and citizen of Edmonton, I'm extremely disappointed in the quality of the administration's report. In short, it is an embarrassment to our city that this administration has relied on flawed statistics to support their position that further regulations are not required. I will highlight the following issues with the statistics relied upon by the city administration in completing their report. Anyone with a background in statistical analysis can clearly see the issues with the report and data collection. From a qualitative perspective, on behalf of my neighbors and citizens of Edmonton who have been dealing with ongoing nuisances from short-term rentals, I point to the following issues that would directly affect this external audit and the report's findings. The Edmonton Police Service statistics relied upon. First and foremost, our hardworking Edmonton police officers should not be burdened with dealing with the nuisances created by short-term rentals. The statistics on complaints related to Airbnb are going to be impacted by the following. These complaints are non-emergency complaints often due to drunk individuals, for example, being in the middle of the street, in the middle of a family neighborhood at 2, 1 o'clock, midnight, and it's not an emergency because no one is in threat. No one's life is being threatened, and there is an intoxicated individual in the middle of the community residential street. It is a non-emergency issue. Non-emergency means we don't get priority, of course, understandably. And by the time the police can follow up on that complaint, that individual has left due to the transient nature of short-term rentals. Should we be burdening EPS with these kind of complaints? Absolutely not. When an individual rents a hotel room in a hotel, the hotel deals with it. They have their own security to deal with it, and neighbors are not impacted or expected to police residents of short-term rentals. We're exhausted as neighbors, as citizens who have to continually work through this system. So the statistics provided by Edmonton Police Service, I would be curious to know if any of those statistics include the complaints that were not resolved or followed through on and were just closed because EPS is not able to get there in time to deal with the matter, and nor should they be expected to police short-term rentals, creating havoc in communities. Bylaw statistics, 0.3% of complaints relate to short-term rentals. Well, let me tell you something. The 311 app does not provide for a complaint specific to short-term rentals. Nuisance complaints is an option. We have submitted nuisance complaints. Bylaw calls us back and tells us, unless there's overflowing garbage or overgrown grass or something along those lines, this is not a nuisance issue, and they close the complaint. When we raise the issue that there is a residential home with more than 4 single units being rented out in a family neighborhood, in violation of the zoning bylaws, they tell us to speak to development compliance. Development compliance tells us to speak to bylaw. Bylaw then says talk to the business licensing people. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing at the city, and it is an embarrassment to our city that this is how the city is operating. We're then referred back to, maybe you should talk to your counselor, and this is how I became aware of this meeting today, was thanks to Councillor Tang and her office, who advised me that this is being discussed today, and I had to make amendments to my schedule so I could be present here to voice my very, very deep concerns. It's unclear what engagement with neighbors and citizens occurred during this audit or data collection by the city administration. There's no clear guidance of who we are to speak to when things go sideways, and we are expected to police short-term rentals when the owner is not present and has transient individuals renting out units nightly from $30 to $40 a night in family residential neighborhoods. People are coming into the city, getting intoxicated, having vendors in these short-term rentals. The homeowner is not present, and it's left to the neighbors to clean up the mess. We cannot expect EPS to be coming in to police this type of stuff. That is not the role of the police. Bylaw says it's not a bylaw issue, and then it falls to us as citizens. And then to hear from the city administration that no further regulatory scheme is required is insulting to us. From a community standard stability and safety perspective, short-term rental results.
I'm sorry, Parm, that's the 5 minutes there. I have to hit the button. Thank you. At this point, though, we're going to questions of the speakers. Councillor Tang, you're first on the board. Do you want to hop in?
If no other committee members want to go ahead, but
go ahead. I'll follow you.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank all of you for being here to share industry perspective from Hotel Association and also from the resident perspective. Both I think are pretty critical in even why this motion was brought forward. So I'll start with the Summerside residents. Thank you for coming. You're not the first, certainly the first people I have heard from around some of the concerns with the short-term rental, and hence why we worked on this motion to bring this forward. But I guess just some clarifying pieces, and Andrea, Andre, Parm, any one of you feel free to jump in. So all of you are very concerned about one particular property, is that correct? Or are there multiple in the neighborhood?
It's one particular property, but as we had this event occur in our neighborhood, we then discovered just the dizzying array of STRs in our neighborhood, and then which brought to light like, oh, now we're noticing all of these things happening in our neighborhood as a result of these STRs that we were unaware of because none of that had been communicated to us.
I see. So some of the, I guess, the symptoms that you're seeing in your neighborhood may not be attributed to one particular property, but you're guessing that it's kind of related to a whole lot of.
Well, yeah, we do have one particular problematic property on our street in our neighborhood, but now we're noticing as a group just the kind of pervasive problems that are increasing as we've scoured Airbnb and VRBO to see what other properties are available and at what prices.
Yeah, gotcha. And just in terms of, because I think you mentioned the development permit side, are any of these properties like a property that's been redeveloped, or more it's around the fact that they're operating under the radar and doesn't necessarily have the proper business permit or license?
They appear to have the, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, it's Andrea. So I would suggest that it appears they attempted to get licenses for these suites. However, if you look at the listings on Airbnb, certainly the type of listing seems to have skirted what would be reasonable from a developmental compliance perspective. And if you ask me, has this single family residence been modified to accommodate 8 suites? To some extent, I mean, I haven't been in the house, but probably there are some modifications. Are those modifications made to impart safety in that home with 8 to 10 people in it? Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Parm, to your point about just kind of the left hand doesn't really know what the right hand is. As a neighborhood, you all have tried lots of different tools available to you, but it's just getting nowhere.
Well, this is the point. You're saying the city is collecting statistics, but the city keeps closing our complaints. In addition, I need to voice also, I have friends who own in Windsor Park area. They are seeing the same issues arise in the Windsor Park area. I have friends who live in Terwilliger area, and the same issue is arising in the Terwilliger area. And they're, when this occurred in our neighborhood, I started having these conversations with other citizens of Edmonton, and they are running into the same walls, and they don't know who to go to, who to complain to. Yeah. EPF can't help, bylaw can't help. This is not just specific to the Summerside area. There are single family dwellings which are being converted into multi-unit apartments, boarding homes, let's say, in the University area, on the White Ave area, in the Terwilliger area, in the Windermere area, in a Griesbach area. Yep. I have spoken to numerous citizens, and they have all indicated this to me. So this is not specific to Summerside. It is specific to the city of Edmonton, and this is not the only one.
Parm, so as I mentioned, because we've been hearing of this from different neighborhoods, that's why we've directed this report since last year. And in fact, there's perhaps, I don't know if you're aware, but there are also work specifically around lodging house underway right now as well. I have about 20 seconds, so I will come back for a second round to some of the people from the hotel industry. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So maybe if I can go to guest Chandler, if you're still with us.
Yes, I am.
So it seems like generally I'm not hearing disagreement around the fact that short-term rentals should pay business tax. I think we all kind of agree with that as a principle. Hotels pay business tax, so should short-term rental. Would you agree?
Yes, I would.
And I think there generally seems to be agreement around the 3 strikes rule that if a provider is negligent in what's going on and there's multiple infractions, that they should have their business license suspended or they should be shut down. Would you generally agree with that?
Well, I think from what we've heard from the residents, how would you know that these operations have had 3 strikes? If it's that difficult to make a complaint and complaints are being closed and there's no one to enforce the rules that are currently in place, how would any operator get to 3 strikes? What needs to happen is a principal residence requirement and mandate that the platforms like Airbnb and VRBO share their data with the municipality so that you can actually enforce the rules and make them compliant, have them accountable for the hosts that they list on their websites. Those hosts that are on their websites need to have a business license and follow the rules of the municipality.
And I think there's generally, I think hearing that one of the platforms is non-compliant today is also or just non-cooperative is, in my words, a bit frustrating. I guess my concern, so do you think we're going to see hotels built in municipalities in future?
No, I do not. We've heard from several investors, why would we build a hotel when we can build a 100-room apartment building with no regulatory burden and cheaper taxes? Why would you build a hotel?
Should we just be charging hotels residential property tax just to make it, like, I mean, if as a kind of a thought experiment, if we're not going to charge one business, should we charge the other business?
Well, you could go further and deregulate hotels completely, and then we'd have a level playing field.
And you currently have, hotels must have AHS inspections?
Absolutely. So one of the pieces that hotels have to do, because they have public swimming pools, they have to send in weekly water samples to public health, have their pools tested. They have to have certified operators who have to take training in order to operate the pool, clean the pool. Airbnbs, they don't have to do that. So one night you could have a stag party, the next night a family could be in there, and that pool does not have to be cleaned.
Many of these short-term rental providers are publicly traded companies, right?
Yep. as I said in my remarks,
I think one of them, the valuation's at billions of dollars.
yeah. So in the research that was conducted by McGill University in 2024, short-term rentals earned 58 million in Edmonton. The top 10% of hosts took 54% of that. So that tells you that these are not mom and pop home sharing businesses. This is big business. These are corporations, speculators coming into the market, scooping up entire homes, condominiums, and renting them out on a nightly basis like hotels.
And if I can jump to Angela quickly with EDMH. Now, EDMH, you're big supporters of Explore Edmonton, is that correct?
Yes, that is absolutely correct.
So your members, the hotels, pay money every year through EDMH towards the tourism industry, towards uplifting of the whole community. That's not a required levy. That's something you do, right?
That's absolutely correct. So our members collect a destination marketing fee, which they then remit to Edmonton Destination Marketing Hotels. And we use that money to provide funding, for example, to Explore Edmonton. I believe, if I'm correct, we are the second largest funder next to the city of Edmonton itself for Explore Edmonton and all of the incredible work they do. On top of that, we use those dollars to support bringing in events like the Canadian Finals Rodeo, the CCMAs. We are out there consistently pushing the city of Edmonton, driving visitation. And it's not only our members, all hotels in the city are working with their individual sales teams on an individual level as well to promote our city. And I'm not sure that I see Airbnb or VRBO helping with that.
Thank you very much. I'm out of time. Councillor Paquette.
Well, thank you very much. Just to follow up with some of that, I am curious about, and I don't know if anyone has looked into this, and maybe this will have to be a question for administration, but we do have a number of infill going in, and I'm just curious if we know if any number of those are being built for the sole purpose of Airbnb. If anyone has seen anything like that, seen builds going up and being advertised.
I do know that in Windsor Park, there have been infills that have resulted in 6 to 8 suites in one home.
Okay, and so you have seen that?
Yes, well, I haven't personally seen it, but I've been told by friends who live in the neighborhood that the infills are resulting in multiple unit suites, definitely more than 4.
Intended for short-term rentals?
It appears that's what the people built it for, yeah.
Okay.
You can also tell by, like, sorry,
No,
just in our investigation, like when we looked into the homeowner on our street, I noticed that they had 14 other rentals available, and they're through an array of properties. So they were definitely maybe not building new properties, but they were purchasing properties with the intent of converting them into large scale short-term rentals with like as many, if there was a closet, it was a room basically. So I mean, you can look through the available listings from anybody and see just the extent of like how far some owners are going.
Okay, so yeah, it seems that we've got an interesting situation where you might have a mom and pop business, which no one objects to. But then you also have the corporatization of this. And it sounds to me that what you're really asking for is just a level playing field. Would that be fair to say?
From the hotel perspective, I would say yes. I think from your residential side of it, where you've got your community members that are here as well, they're looking for regulations and ways to report back. The hotel side really is looking for that level playing field and, taxation and same regulations that we would face from a hotel perspective. But from the residential side of it, it's reporting, it's policing, it's enforcing and monitoring what's happening in and around these places.
Right, and you know, to that, we saw in the report that it was just like about, I think, 0.32% of calls for disturbances were going to Airbnb or VRBO, short-term rentals. I'm just curious, what percentage of police calls does anyone know go to hotels, and how we look at that through the ratio of density of people.
I don't think you can quantify that. You know, I personally don't have that statistic of how often my hotels that I directly work for would be phoning the police, because we employ our own security officers. Right. So if we need to, you know, evict a guest or have a conversation with a guest, it's the management and the security team that's doing that. STRs don't have that. They're not having a security team that's going to come in and support their properties.
And you have to remember, your stats aren't accurate. Your stats are not accurate because our complaints are not being followed through and they're being closed, whether it's to EPS or to bylaw.
Okay, is there a way to verify that? Do we have stats for that?
I can tell you, I'm one of the residents whose complaints have been closed. I have filed minimum 4 bylaw complaints. I can give you the name of the bylaw officers I've spoken to. I can share the emails I have. That's
okay.
just one resident.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, I may have some questions for administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenley. Councillor Wright.
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll go to Parm. You said that the multi-unit residences that are going up, it appears to be for short-term rentals. Have they been completed, or do you have anything sort of, I guess, to confirm that? Do you see them being posted?
It's not difficult to do an Airbnb search, and you will see them yourself.
Okay, but these ones specific, the ones that you said,
the specific one.
Yeah.
The one in the Summerside area, yes. She has 7 single units rented out. Okay. Each bedroom has its own lockbox. It's all on Airbnb in one home.
Okay. I just wanted to just clarify that, and because I mean, to me, there's a couple different issues here in this item. So not just the business taxation and that, and competing with the hotels, but also the noise complaints and that. So is this where your 311 inquiries have also been registered on this property, or?
Yeah, we have, and then our 311 bylaw complaints get closed. We get passed to development compliance. Development compliance tells us to go back to municipal enforcement. Municipal enforcement says, okay, maybe talk to business licensing. Everywhere we go, they're being closed. And now we've engaged the councillor, and Councillor Tang is making inquiries. And now I understand there's more investigations happening. But we got to this point where we just finally had enough. But I can't tell you how many complaints have been closed. Okay. And so your stats are flawed.
Okay.
We don't have a system to do. Yeah, I mean, not your stats. The city's stats are flawed because we don't have an actual system to count. If you look at the 311 app, tell me where the short-term rental complaints are. There isn't one. We file the nuisance and they say it's not a nuisance.
Okay, I agree. Similar to Parm, all 4 of my bylaw complaints have been closed. I've been told they were forwarded. I never heard anything back, and then there's no further action. So.
Okay. And you said Councillor Tang is following up on those for you, which is great. Because my concern, I guess, with the noise complaints is that we get them at community halls as well, and even private residences, single family homes in neighborhoods as well. And maybe we need to do a bit more for our overall enforcement on all those types of complaints, whether or not they're short-term rentals or long-term residences.
Sorry, can I just add to that?
Yeah.
I mean, we generally, when we talk about issues, we talk about noise complaints, but it's not. It's when you have 8 suites in a house, it's excessive garbage during garbage pickup with, not enough garbage containers. It's an overabundance of parking. It's people trying to enter the wrong homes. It's people using these premises to do drugs, leaving all of that trash behind. And, we haven't touched on this, but Airbnb does not care to rectify any of these issues. They don't even have, like, you can file a complaint and they say, oh, well, we'll take it up with the host, but they can't tell you anything. And our particular issue, we had an individual going on a bender. He didn't book the room. His family member booked the room for him. So when we filed the complaint with Airbnb, they could not find this guest because he did not book the room. So you can see the difficulty it is to not just follow up with the city, but then Airbnb, they don't care to follow through on anything.
And trying to track down who the owner is and who
Yeah.
the renter is. Okay, I can understand the frustration
And
there.
it's the transient nature of these individuals cycling through family neighborhoods where kids are trying to play street hockey out in the middle of the road. And now we have these people on benders and drug addicts hanging out in family neighborhoods. And it's a transient nature of these individuals who are coming and renting a room for $31 a night.
Okay, thank you for filling me in on a few more details there. I appreciate that. And my time is up, so I don't have time for more questions.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Councillor Wright. Councillor Tang.
Just a few more questions. Maybe I'll go to Steve, because I think you summarized it pretty well. There's a few different issues here, and leveling the playing field for the tourism industry, but also some of the compliance enforcement, sort of helping residents to navigate some of these challenges. I guess I just want to talk a little bit about the options here. So from your perspective, I think I heard Lori earlier say kind of all three options. Do you have any concerns around kind of what the report is saying that, if we put these all three options in, driving the industry more underground?
I mean, if something goes underground, then that is going to become a police enforcement matter, right? I mean, you're going to go and lead further into the crime and the world that comes around anything that gets driven underground, right? You're still going to have the complaints coming from the community. There's still going to be monitoring in that regard. You're going to get the nuisances coming up, and then it's going to be flagged as a problem property at that point. Driving it underground, we're not trying to force this away. We appreciate mom and pops that are trying to, have an income that's supporting them, supporting their mortgage, what that's going to look like. Our challenge comes with the corporations that are doing this and aren't being paid or aren't paying proper taxes. They're not being subjected to the same regulations that we are.
Yeah, I think we can all agree. I think some more regulation is needed, but certainly you're not saying we want to see the entire short-term rental industry out of Edmonton. They provide options, but you want to see some of these greater regulations.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I guess maybe just two residents, Parm, Andre, and Andrea, because I think the other issue that I've gotten from your emails and from this meeting is that, yes, there's the bylaw enforcement, but I think the regulations aren't super clear to begin with to enforce. Hence why they get closed so quickly, because it's not clear where it actually lands. Is it licensing? Is it permit? Is it et cetera, et cetera? So you're not asking for short-term rental to be entirely gone, but just we need better process and regulations for it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely, and transparency to the communities or direct neighbors to where these are getting set up, right?
Yeah.
I think as taxpayers, we also deserve the right to know what is getting built and set up next to us, just like these infills and other developments outside of necessarily pre-existing developmental compliance. They need neighborhood approval, and the fact that 8-unit Airbnb got set up without any transparency to the neighborhood is beyond me.
I guess the other thing I'm curious, just on that note, the current zoning bylaw does allow, let's say, childcare. Sorry?
It allows 4 units.
Yes. No. actually more than that, but I think it also allows other things like small businesses, like say childcare, without extensive public hearing like it used to. And these are some of the questions I'll ask administration as well. And I'm not sure if there is extensive notification in the neighborhood for that as well. So, anyways, thank you for your feedback and clarification as well. And then to everybody taking the time of your day to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, and I echo the remarks from Councillor Tang. Thank you all very much for your engagement here. At this time, we'll go to questions of the administration. If I may hop on first, I guess I find it. First of all, thank you for engaging on this. Thank you for all the work. It's clear that this is you've looked at this in a multi-dimensional way here. We talk about this going underground, but it's underground already. It's not registered. These are unregistered businesses. How are we defining this industry going underground?
So we don't have a definition for it going underground per se. It would be seeing a reduction in licenses or non-compliance. But what I would say is that we have been actively working to achieve increased compliance. We've had really good conversations with both of those major parties, platforms, and we're working on improving that compliance. And we're seeing those results. So yes, we have a large number of unlicensed businesses who are operating. We're increasing their compliance, and it's active.
And that's really promising. I mean, getting Airbnb to the table to 70% is great, and that's exciting. It seems to be I think just from all just the conversation today, there seems to be the most disagreement among options 1, but there generally seems to be wide agreements with option 2 and 3. I still think the consideration around the taxation one is a big one. So if we register the platforms would have to account for their business. They would have to report, and then we would be able to charge a tax rate accordingly. Is that correct?
I won't speak on the taxes. I'd ask one of the tax colleagues to jump on. But yes, once we have a license from the platforms, the license from the platform is for the platform, and we do know the address of all the individual hosts who are licensed, because that's required when they have a license. So if you have a license, then that would create that data pool that taxation might be able to use.
Okay, for the sake of expediency, I'll ask the clerk, do we have I had asked for a potential motion. Are we close to that, or I'm sorry if I missed it while chairing?
I can chat you some draft wording that we have so far.
That'd be most helpful. Yeah, it might be helpful if the committee's willing just to put it on the floor, and then we can kind of bash it around from there. So, it's quite concerning when I hear there's almost a 0.75% tax increase that's being left on the table right now by the providers not paying business tax. So certainly if we can, that's something important to me in terms of the level playing field and helping mitigate the impact to the tax base. Just looking, clerk, if you had the wording. I would like to put on the floor that administration prepare amendments to bylaw 2002 to A, require residential rental accommodation short-term licenses to remain on the premise while operating the business. B, require digital short-term rental platforms to acquire a business license and require platforms to share their registration and usage data with the City of Edmonton. C, explore implementing a 3 strikes rule to suspend short-term rental licenses with serious disturbance violations on the property within a set time frame. And number 2, that administration provide a report outlining options to implement a tax on short-term rentals. So if I put that on the floor, then from there, maybe that can guide our discussion as next steps. We can vote on them individually. I know there's not unanimity, but we can then go from there. So I'll yield the floor, or I'll now go to Councillor Tang.
To administration, maybe I'll start first with the engagement. I guess I see there are some industry groups involved, like the Realtor Association, but is there any particular reason why the hotel industry wasn't directly spoken with?
Thank you for the question. And we do really appreciate the hotel industry coming out and sharing their concerns. And we acknowledge that they weren't consulted through this work. Administration really focused on the motion that was at hand, and through that, it asked us to look at the regulatory environment of short-term rentals. It didn't ask for that comparison to the other providers, and so that's why we focused our attention on the work that we did. And we used the jurisdictional review and the engagement and also the information from enforcement to guide the work of this report. And so the issue of competition within industry or alignment of regulatory operating environments was not our focus, but we do appreciate the industry coming out and sharing their concerns and ideas about going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember the debate from April of last year, but I have met with some of the hotel association and heard some of the feedback there as well, and I had anticipated that they would be at least one of the stakeholders. So I'm disappointed that they weren't directly. And I guess my other question around method is, typically we do insight surveys on something like this. Was there a particular reason why that wasn't done, just to reach a broader, public? Because for the attachment one, I actually can't find the sample size in terms of the online survey.
So there was an online survey with the general public through an insight survey. That was to gather people who could participate in the public opinion research. We didn't do general public engagement after we formed our policy options. If council did want to direct us to do more public engagement, we could do that.
And then what was the sample size for the online surveys?
We can find that. I don't have it right in front of me right now.
Okay. And then I just wanted to understand this, like option 3, because I think to some of the speakers' points, if we're not tracking good data, how do we know, one particular property has 3 strikes? And like, what's the threshold for that?
So we do appreciate hearing the concerns raised from the public about some of the challenges navigating through the 311 app. And internally, we're discussing about how we might be able to improve some scripting and some handoff points. Within the report, we mentioned I think it was 98 complaints received. Those are complaints that came in through 311. They are complaints that mentioned short-term rentals, and each of those complaints was investigated. Once they are investigated, they do become closed. That's just the status of it. And some of those will have had some actions taken and some will not have.
But so that 98, some of them had actions, some of them didn't have actions, you're saying, and the ones that residents call in that have been closed are accounted for it within that 98. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, Chantel Parazzolo here with Community Standards. Of those 98 complaints, those are all the complaints received, and our data shows that about half of those were unfounded or not verifiable violations. But we did, in fact, issue about 16 tickets in relation to those complaints.
And then are those 98, are they all like unique properties, or are a lot of them repeat?
I don't have that information before me right now. Those complaints, though, would be specific to municipal enforcement officer investigations, so primarily focusing around community standards bylaw violations and the business license bylaw violations.
Okay, yeah, because I'll be interested, because potentially there are some that will fulfill that 3-strike requirement, right? I guess beyond sort of that option 3, which really focuses around the sort of the enforcement compliance side of things, what other measures can we take to strengthen, when residents like use 311 as a tool, the frustration is that it gets nowhere, to strengthen that aspect of the city process? I'm also running out of time.
Yeah, so we are looking at how we can improve some scripting and some handoffs. 311 was also subject to an audit, which should, the results of which are currently being implemented and should support. And in my closing comment, according to attachment 1, there were 612 participants in the online survey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ting. Councillor Rice. Right, pardon me, right.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jans. So with those 98 311 calls, those were individual complaints, or were those like 5 or 6 for one property?
They were individual complaints.
Okay.
There was no duplicates included, but I don't have the data as to whether or not they were for multiple or the same property. So
On different occasions?
Correct.
Okay. And then with them being closed without explanation, I'm assuming that's sort of due to privacy, whether you've issued a ticket or not, you can't.
Correct. So our officers do investigate each complaint received, and if they don't have evidence to proceed with any warnings or fines, they will close the file. We don't proactively provide that information to complainants, but if they do request a callback, we most certainly do provide some general information around the processes, evidence required, just not specific details, because privacy prevents us from sharing anything enforcement related.
Okay, so even if they are issued a ticket, the general public wouldn't know about it because of privacy?
Correct.
So it appears like nothing's being done, but in actuality something is?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. With the motion on the floor, I don't really know whether I have enough sort of concrete information or data to either support or go against any of these recommendations. I'm just wondering, in comparison, so the 98 311 calls, how many other calls into 311 relate to noise complaints in residences or community halls?
So from those 98, our municipal enforcement officers received approximately 29,000 complaints in 2024, and that's where we're pulling that 98 from. And so those complaints would vary from snow and walk, nuisance properties, graffiti, that type of complaint. Our municipal enforcement officers do not enforce noise, just because they don't have the, when it comes to disturbances, they don't have the legal authority to enter into a private residence to be able to address what might be causing that noise complaint.
And
so
that's referred over to
police.
yeah.
Correct.
Okay. And those noise complaints, a lot of them happen at nighttime when we don't have bylaw officers really on staff, right? Or
Correct. So our officers work typical Monday to Friday business hours, and looking at our data, we do track bylaw noise complaints that are received, and for 2024 we have 0 within that 98. So the vast majority of those 98 complaints are actually nuisance property complaints, followed with waste complaints and long grass.
okay. And then, sorry, in relation to, like, if we were able and had the funds available to increase bylaw officers to be available evenings and weekends, would that help with some of this enforcement?
It would help, but it would not help as it relates to disturbances and some of the more extreme issues happening at those properties. That still would require Edmonton Police Service to attend. Again, it goes back to our officers are non-uniformed. Their legal authorities lie within municipal bylaws, and so they are limited in how they can deal with people-specific issues as opposed to property-related issues.
Okay, and I think Councillor Knack put forward a motion to increase the authorities of our bylaw officers, our peace officers. Is there something that could be expanded that way that?
We could explore that. I think if we're expanding authorities, then we're looking at changing the deployment where it would then be maybe a peace officer responsibility as opposed to a bylaw enforcement officer's responsibility.
Okay, okay. And I've got a few seconds left. Okay, I'll leave it there and come back. Okay, after I think. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Rice.
I'm sorry. So I'm here. Same question as Councillor Wright talk about. We do have or do not have enough data or information to really determine supports this or not supports it. But I want to focus 2 questions here. The first question is about, so I heard very clear, and at this point, city administration does not recommend to any change, any amendment and to the bylaw. So right now, this motion on the floor is actually reflects 3 options. Can you tell me a little bit more? What's your interpretation for the, you don't recommend any amendment, but right now the amendments for the business license bylaw. So is there anything there you want to comment on? What's the impact this could be?
So when we did the work, we don't mean to, we understand that there are problematic operators, and we understand that these problematic operators do have an impact on their neighbors, and we don't want to dismiss the neighbors' concerns. But when we look at the breadth of the whole city, we aren't finding that regulations are the most effective way to address some of these issues, because a lot of times it does, like what we're hearing is that it might be more of the people application. So that's, you know, how we put forward the recommendations. We did explore these some other options and identified some areas where there might be an ability to further regulate, but these options are unknown. There are enforcement challenges, and they may not get to the heart of the matter. And so that's kind of how come we put forward the report in the way that we did. And I don't know if I've answered your question, Councillor.
So yes, the ABC actually reflects the 3 options you put on in the report. And for each option, I really appreciate you put so many details there. So what I heard here, you would like to see these 3 options be included in the change for the regulations, or you still don't want to see amendment at this point? So those 3 options just for the further discussion. So that is I want to get very clear sense from you.
So administration has not recommended making changes to the bylaw.
Okay. So you actually, your recommendation is say, even though you have these 3 options listed here, but you're still thinking these 3 options should not be moving forward. Is that my understanding correct? Okay. So because I read the 3 options here specifically for the option 2, option 1, talk about the business license revenue reduction. I do not believe, and our Edmontonians want to go that way to reduce business license and revenue. Can you comment on? Can you provide a little bit more information right now? And because our tax rate keep getting so high, and then if we reduce the business license revenue, this license revenue and a part of our operating revenue is under the user fee category. So that means we are losing the revenue if we make this change. Is that right? And based on the information on the report.
Councillor, with the motion ahead in front of committee today, there's no option that would reduce the business license revenue. If this were to be approved, the option 1A requiring licensees to remain on the premises will have some unintended consequences, both for some of the options that are also put on that motion that could have complexities around differing tax rates, as well as what type of businesses are being licensed. So I guess to answer your questions, I don't think in terms of administration's recommendation or what's on the table currently, the license revenue in general won't go down.
Okay, so yeah, I see that's very clear indicated in the report. So this change may result in the business license revenue reduction.
Sorry, I'll just jump in.
I don't have time.
I was just going to say, if we see a reduction in licenses because of the motion, then yes, there would be a reduction in revenue.
Okay, thank you. My time is out.
Okay, Councillor Cartmill.
Great, thank you. Appreciate the conversation today. I like this motion. I have essentially one question, and that is this. At what point do we move from a definition of a short-term rental to a somewhat typical rental? Maybe this is what Mr. Pollock was kind of leaning to. This, I think as it's written, this actually almost defines anyone that is renting out an entire home as a short-term rental, unless we put some sort of threshold on the length of time of the rental.
So the business
Probably
license,
not saying that very well.
No,
Yeah.
the business license bylaw does differentiate between short-term and long-term rentals. And I do believe the differentiation is 30 days. So if you're renting for longer than 30 days for one stay, then you would fall into a long-term rental accommodation. We have a license for that. And if you're renting less than 30 days, there's a short-term rental. Oh, 31, sorry.
31, okay. And I in conversation with the hotel representatives, hotel industry representatives, I think their number is 28 days. So I don't know that matters much. Does that mean that if I own a property that I'm using or that I'm employing as a long-term rental, that I need a license? Because I think that's in...
You do if you have 3 rentals on the same property or 3 rentals across the city.
I see. Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Salvador.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate this motion being put on the floor. I just wanted to ask administration about the second part of this motion around the report coming back for options to implement tax on short-term rentals. So maybe just an open-ended question. What would administration expect to come back with? And do you have what you need to come back with a actionable report with some options that could be moved forward with at that time?
Kate Watt from, oh, there we go. Thanks, Kate.
Sorry, Councillor Salvador, it's Kate Watt, your city assessor. I believe that it is a fairly open-ended direction, but it will allow us to come back with a report that better articulates the legislation that exists around assessing and taxing types of property that, and really where the demarcation is between hoteling and accommodation and residential accommodation, which is a gray space that makes this particular type of taxation complex. Hotels are defined specifically. Residential is defined in a sense. And the issue that we sometimes run into with short-term rentals is that they tend to be in property that is designed for permanent living accommodation, which is the definition essentially of residential. That said, we do have a city charter that gives us slightly different or more nuanced interpretations that are available to us, and honestly similar to the derelict subclass for residential, there may be things that we can explore there. So what I would be asking for is sufficient time to do a proper analysis and come back to you with what we find.
Okay, that's really helpful context. And yeah, I guess my question was more around that gray zone and trying to figure out, I guess that would be part of the report, is coming back with what is that line, and what's the line between casual hosts versus commercial operators, and how would we, in a way that is defensible, sort of create that demarcation. So that would be included in the report.
Yes, that's our hope.
Great.
Just to add, that line is further grayed or blurred with the potential motion of 1A requiring the licensee to remain on premise while operating business, because now you have a permanent resident within the building itself. So there's just some conflict there that we may want to discuss as we move these motions forward.
And if I could add to that, Mike Gunther from Legal here, having regard to the way that the motion is drafted, I do see serious concerns arising in terms of the conflict of the way that A is included and then Section 2, because if the desire is to create a classification for short-term rentals, it would be indistinguishable from someone who ultimately remains on the premises if it's essentially a home. So do have some concerns with that from a legal perspective, among a few other issues.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you flagging that, and might be worth looping back for a second round specifically to dig into that, are there, you mentioned among other potential issues. I just wanted to give you some space and time. Is there any other legal questions or challenges you want to flag for committee?
Well, Councillor, just in terms of, going too deep into the legal issues, I think my preference would be in private, but
Okay.
at a high level, just looking in terms of short-term rentals have been a municipal issue that we've, as a city and other municipalities, been trying to deal with legally for, 10 or more years. Whenever we're trying to regulate short-term rentals, it's really important to focus on what is actually taking place in the city. And when we dealt with ride sharing, where many of these ride sharing organizations or companies are based, in the United States, overseas, it is very difficult to enforce against entities that don't have a presence in the jurisdiction. So I think it's really important that we take a look at what we're actually trying to achieve through this motion, and if there are perhaps better ways, whether it's more enforcement capabilities, a closer look at enforcement in terms of problem properties, versus whether we're trying to actually reach into areas where it will be functionally very challenging for us to actually do anything.
Right.
That's where I see some issues, Councillor.
Okay. One more quick question. If we require platforms to share their registration and usage data, would that be a viable way to do time and space calculations on the taxation side?
I would say yes, because what would happen is they would apply for their license that they could get onto the platform, and then the platform would verify that they are registered with that platform. So the platforms aren't providing us any more information, but it helps verify that this is operating as an STR, and we could hopefully use that data for taxation purposes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette.
Yeah, thank you. And that line of question was very much aligned with what I am looking at. And so, for example, if someone has a home-based business, they get a license for that business, and then they still pay regular property tax, right?
Correct.
And property tax. Yeah. So okay. So then, if, however, let's say there's a house that got turned into like a little coffee house, does that house now, if there's no actual residence there, does that still pay residential property tax, or does that become a commercial property?
I'm sorry, Councillor, could you repeat the question?
Yeah. Oh, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay. So if you have a home and let's say you're running your home-based business out of it, that's fine. But then say you own a property that is a home,
Yep.
and the entire thing is now just like a coffee house, for example. People can come and eat some pie, whatever. Is that still a residential property, or does that become a commercial property?
If it is used for commercial purposes and those are clearly defined, it is subject to the non-residential tax rate. Yes.
Okay, so I think we've got a path right there, don't we?
No, because there is a difference between a coffee shop and a place that a person sleeps.
Okay, I see. So the line that's blurred here is that we are looking at what is the difference between just renting a place or a short-term rental. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So what I think the gray area is for many of us in trying to work out how to best activate this space is not capturing long-term rentals, because they are an important form of accommodation, particularly in, a housing challenged situation, and differentiating what exactly is a long-term rental from a short-term rental. And if it is 30 days, how can we have that information in a way that is defensible in terms of sort of tax appeals and so on? I'm talking purely from the tax perspective.
And would not business licensing answer that question?
Yes. One thing we could do is I believe we could tie it to business licensing, but your problem there is what a lot of my other colleagues have spoken about around who has taken out the license that they're required to
right.
take.
Now, how difficult then is it to determine, if a property and address is using a short-term rental site? Is there not a way to just like gather those addresses, compare it to our database of business licenses?
It may be. It is not something that we are doing at the moment, and I hate to say we're not actually resourced to do that at the moment on the tax side.
I can do it for you in a weekend.
I would defer to my business licensing colleagues to speak to that aspect.
So Councillor Paquette, we'll be able to capture those who get a business license through this process. The challenge always remains those who remain unlicensed. They would not be taxed because we wouldn't have their information. And we have found this space somewhat challenging to enforce in because we often don't physically know where the location is. Part of STRs, they don't advertise the exact location until you rent. And so there's a high level of enforcement need to actually verify addresses. Working with the platforms, though, is our best way forward of increasing compliance, because if you don't have a way to advertise your property, you lose out on a large market share. And this is why we're really advocating for that work, that shared relationship with the platforms.
Okay, so I think that there's something here that we should probably be pursuing if we actually want to get a handle on this instead of whacking at the edges of it. And that is just some, because look, I'm pretty sure that if you ask any short-term rental operator, like, do you want to go underground or would you rather just pay the licensing required in order to make you compliant? If it's profitable, most people just want to keep doing their business rather than, and I don't even know how they would go underground, but what can we do? What would then be the next step in order to determine who is renting and how we can... Oh, I'm out of time.
I'm sorry,
I missed
Councillor,
that.
that's time.
Yeah, but if someone can follow up on that, that'd be great.
Great. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. To the mover. 1C, you're talking about the three-strike rule, but in the report, it's recommending a fine as well. You're not including that fine aspect in this?
I welcome all of the above. I'll ask administration how they interpreted that.
Each offense would be subject possibly to a fine, but with the three-strike rule, would there be a specific fine once you're struck out?
So if the three strikes rule were applied and a license were suspended, then the violation would be continuing to operate once your license is suspended.
So you could get a ticket for operating post-suspension, a fine.
Okay. And this only applies to the short-term rentals. It wouldn't be to just somebody who likes to have backyard parties.
Correct. We are specifically referring to short-term rentals, and if you have a license for a short-term rental.
And only if you have a license. And if you don't have a license for a short-term rental, and we can't verify that it is a short-term rental, how do we apply the three-strike rule?
We can't, because the three-strike rule would apply to those who have a license. But we do have a multitude of enforcement tools. The MEOs still go out and enforce on if you have overflowing garbage. This can occur whether you're a short-term resident or not. Like, any property in the city could be subject to any of these concerns and have them reported on them. So it's just, the idea would be that if you are operating a short-term rental, you could lose your ability to operate that if you're not showing compliance with the various bylaws, if you're not being a good operator.
Okay, but you have to have that license in order to use it. If you don't have a license, what's the repercussions? Okay. Ms. Watt, you had talked about there's a difference between a coffee shop and where a person sleeps. So where a person, and talking non-residential, residential, but hotels are where people sleep and they're charged non-residential rates, right?
Correct. That's why I mentioned that hotels and formal hoteling accommodation is treated differently in the legislation, because that is the recognition that this is a commercial enterprise dealing in providing accommodations on a short-term basis.
Okay. Short-term rentals then are not specifically noted in the, is it the provincial legislation then?
Yes, all of assessment and taxation is governed by the Municipal Government Act and its associated regulations. I don't have the citations with me. We will definitely be articulating that in the future report. But yeah, short-term rentals are essentially areas within homes designed for permanent living accommodation. Thus, I personally don't think they meet the test of non-residential. We have yet to explore that space as a municipality, and I'm not aware of any other municipality in the province that has done this either. So we are into a space of exploration, which is why I do request a good amount of time to do a thorough job with the report.
Okay, and the way that this motion is prepared gives you that amount of time?
I don't see when we're coming back, but I believe the wording of 2, particularly if it is separated, acknowledging that if it is combined with 1, it does somewhat limit what we'll be coming back with. Anyway, insofar as the wording is pretty broad, we can come back with what we find and options as a consequence.
Okay. If 1A was taken out, would that give you sort of broader ability to provide a more thorough report, I guess?
Yes, it would help us in terms of differentiating what kind of property we're talking about. Because as Mr. Gunther said, if we're saying that the owner of the property must be in residence, we are ensuring that this cannot be seen as anything other than a residential property.
Okay. Okay, and is this, I guess, is this legislation more that should be coming down from the provincial level? Like to provide greater clarity on short-term rentals?
I don't think there's any movement at the province to contemplate this, but I imagine that the hoteliers associations will have had discussions.
Okay, I would like to make an amendment to this to strike 1A.
I'll consider it friendly for now.
Okay, and others on the committee, Councillor Rice? Would that be friendly to you?
Okay, sure.
Okay, thank you then.
I'll ask if the clerk can update the wording, and then we'll go to Councillor Tang.
Do you need to go before me?
No, I'm just trying to remove myself from the board.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you for that. I think a lot of questions have been asked. I just want to touch on one more thing that I don't think has really or I'm not clear how to go about it. You know, I think people have talked about if you're a home and you open up a coffee shop, and I'm thinking of homes, you open up a childcare. Typically, there's pretty clear signage around that. Sometimes I think about Airbnb akin to Uber and some of the rideshare, where some of our regulations have kind of required them to put signage to say this vehicle is an Uber vehicle. We don't do anything like that for Airbnb. Have we considered some of the transparency aspect that the speakers have raised? You know, do you foresee any of these options kind of can address that? And if not, you know, what needs to be done around that?
So I think what you're suggesting is potentially having a requirement for signage that an Airbnb operates out of that premise.
Yeah, and I think the intent is just like any business in the neighborhood. You know, people want to know if this is a business, just for that. So
there is no requirement for a business to have signage. They typically choose to advertise. What we sometimes see in this space is that actually, because it often is a home, there is a desire not to share that information with others. And it might be an infringement on privacy rights, but I may not have that correct. I'm looking to my legal colleagues for any support here.
Sorry, but just on that, for some of these are, you know, corporations who are renting multiple properties that are not really the corporation's home, right? Like I'm like thinking about those types of instances as well, where they're not really used as a home.
Well, Councillor, regardless of whether it's a corporation or a mom and pop or just an individual, the same sort of considerations apply from a legal perspective. I do think this would engage privacy issues, whether or not this isn't an issue we've looked into in depth at this point, but before making any recommendations that any sort of amendments to the bylaw would incorporate this, I think it's something that legal would want to just take a very close look at just to make sure we're on side.
Okay. So do you need direction for that? Or do you feel this, like what's on the table here kind of covers it? I mean, I don't see it specifically, but I'm just wondering.
Well, Councillor, certainly something we could look at. It's not part of the motion right now. If this is something that Council wants us to look at further, I don't think that the ideal approach would be to include it as the bylaw, as part of the bylaw amendments to bring back. But if this is something that you would like us to look at, or Council would like us to look at, we can certainly do that before the next time this matter comes back.
Well, I was just wondering if it's like a part 3, like administration look into. I'm not on committee, but I would encourage my committee colleagues to consider that.
I was just going to, if you don't mind me just jumping in,
Sure.
notification to adjacents was raised as a concern, just that the guests could be, guests or hosts could possibly be harassed if there was, or there could be retaliation or negative interaction. So we do have some data that there isn't support for that necessarily from those who are hosts, but that doesn't mean that we can't explore it if directed.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, I'm just requesting to investigate that issue. I think we've heard other kind of on the other side where, renters are going to the front door, trying to open up the neighbor's door and getting lots of, I think, challenges there as well. Sorry, just one last question on the legal perspective, Mr. Gunter. I think earlier you mentioned a few, and then I didn't capture all of them. But regarding that option 3, just the additional legal risks, like you mentioned, that would be hard to enforce when it comes to
Sorry,
the
Councillor,
platforms. No, go ahead. Sorry.
you said option 3. Are you talking
Option
about the
3.
third part of the previous, or the motion before it was amended to talk about the 3 strikes rule, or?
Correct.
Yeah, well, and I'll just say in a general sense, I would just encourage Council to remember that a 3 strikes rule is something that there always has to be administrative and procedural fairness. So a 3 strikes rule is perhaps a simple way to define that, you have 3 chances of bad behavior before your license is pulled. But the Canadian courts generally don't like something as cut and dry as a 3 strikes you're out rule. It's more of sort of an American concept. So we just have to be careful to remember that there may be exceptions, there may be circumstances, and there's always going to be an opportunity for someone who feels that they, want to mount a defense or ultimately want to explain a circumstance, that it's not going to be automatic every time.
Okay. Oh, I'm out of time. Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay, Councillor Wright.
Thank you. So on that point, then, can we change the name from 3 strikes rules? Just so to have sort of escalating enforcement, or?
Yeah, my advice would be that escalating enforcement is always preferable to a hard and fast sort of a 3 strikes you're out rule. And there's certainly logical, and it's supported in law, to have more onerous penalties depending on, repeat behavior. What we just want to make sure is that there's a comfortable and clear definition of what a serious occurrence might involve. So that's work that can be done, taken offline. But 3 strikes rule it comes down to semantics. My preference would be to see escalating enforcement, or perhaps a mechanism for business license review is something that we could take offline. But just the idea of a 3 strikes rule, it does sort of set out a pretty rigid, inflexible approach that we might find ourselves having to argue against in a tribunal or a courtroom.
So again, to amend the motion, can we, to explore implementing an escalating enforcement process for short-term rentals? And would it only, and could it only apply to short-term rentals, or would it also apply to, I don't know, like community halls that maybe hold a lot of parties that have problems, or?
Well, I think that would be bigger than this
Okay.
particular body of amendments here.
Okay.
I would consider it friendly if administration has common understanding of what the wording is you're suggesting around the escalating enforcement instead of the 3 strikes per legal.
Okay, and I'm looking to administration.
Explore implementing an escalating enforcement process leading to the suspension of a short-term rental license where multiple serious disturbance violations on the property occur within a set time frame.
I like that. Does administration like that? Did clerk get
Question
that?
to legal. Could we keep the 3 in? There's a lot of administrative reasons why administration likes the 3. So it's not a 3 strikes rule, but after 3, that gives us clear direction of how we would approach things.
Yeah, yes, no concerns from that perspective. And again, Councillor, I was just trying to go off the top of my head and put something cohesive together, but that's just fine.
And recognizing also just that CSLAC does have an opportunity to weigh in on any suspension.
Of course.
Thank you.
To the Council, right? That work?
That works if somebody captured it.
I would consider that friendly as well too, and I don't see any objection.
Okay, clerk.
You have 2 minutes. Did you have anything further while the admin is?
Well, while they're doing that, maybe I'll ask Mr. Kwan, since he's sitting up there, what's the impact on short-term rentals to our housing stock? You've got 1 minute and 45 seconds.
Thanks for the question, Councillor. As indicated in the report and the work done by the consultants on the project, we're not seeing, based on the available data, that there's any impact on affordability at all.
Okay, on the available data, but we don't really have a fulsome, comprehensive data study, right? Because it's kind of hard to gauge what's short-term rentals.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, that's too bad.
Well, Councillor, just to add to that, on that Edmonton-wide macro scale, rents have been going down. If you take as a percentage of units across the city, we have about 3,000 licensed STRs or unlicensed, about that, out of 400,000 housing units. So the perspective of that amount of units changing the overall rental rate is quite low.
Okay, but that's licensed again. We don't know what's unlicensed. Even if it's double, might not have too much more of an impact. And so do we have some words?
We are working on wording. We'll get that up shortly for you.
So I guess Councillor Knack can go and, okay, thank you.
Councillor Knack.
Yeah, thanks. Councillor Jans, I just actually want them maybe to finish that because I might have just to Councillor Tang's suggestion about exploring options for greater transparency, example signage for short-term rentals. I wouldn't mind adding that, but I'll let the first set of wording go first so that we don't any concern with administration if we're exploring options on that. Not, you know, I heard what you answered to Councillor Tang, but I wouldn't mind getting the options as part of that report.
Yeah, I understand options. I guess just with caution, just in terms of what we're trying to achieve here. Sure. As said, many businesses operate without signages. Many businesses within home-based businesses operate without signages. Why SDRs in particular would we force signage would be concerns.
Here, and you will identify that as part of any options and reports. I just also appreciate that, you know, we have a councillor who's not part of committee who's had a lot of residents come and speak today, and I think they're not the only councillor that's run into this. So I think it's worth at least getting that information. I'm not sure if I would support it, but I think we can at least get it. So, okay, once that is updated.
So maybe I'll ask if we could just stand at ease for like 5 minutes while admin prepares the wording for both Councillor Wright's suggestion and then Councillor Knack's suggestion. And because Councillor Tang's just to speak to it.
Yeah, if they've got.
Do we need a couple of minutes? Just a.
I need a couple of minutes. I did not catch Councillor Knack.
I was going to wait till you finished updating the friendly amendment for the other, and then I will say it.
Okay, we should have the friendly amendment for 1B up on this slide shortly.
Okay, let's stretch legs for 2 minutes and then come back.
I think it's there.
Oh,
appreciating we can try to finish this before lunch.
Of
So
course,
I don't see a reason to wait if that's updated, which it is now. So that updated wording, therefore I'll move just a, well, what may or may not be friendly. It would be a point 3 that says administration explore options for greater transparency, example signage for short-term rentals.
Okay. And I have Councillor Paquette to be added to the board too, if when you're done.
Yeah, as long as that's friendly. I've said the words.
I think that's friendly. Yep.
Okay, then I'm done.
No.
Okay.
No,
it's not friendly. Okay.
Then I'll move that.
So, Councillor Naka's moved the wording. Do you want to introduce it?
Nope.
Okay. Any questions? Hearing none. Clerk, would we be able to vote on that, or?
Speaking.
Oh, you want to speak? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get that amendment wording on the floor or on the screen as well for you.
Okay, give us 1 sec, Councillor Rice, and then you can speak to it when we get it up on the screen.
So I can speak now?
Councillor Nack, that's the correct wording? Yep. Yep, okay, Councillor Rice, you have the floor.
So I just very quickly heard very clear the concerns from legal and also from city administration. So, yes, great transparency it's something we have been pursue. We have to, as a city government, we have been doing lots of things to keep this greater transparency. I totally support that intention. I really appreciate that intention to be reflected in this amendment. But with so many other concerns, and then we heard, I'm not going to repeat those concerns, and we already heard from the answers city administration and the legal provided. I don't think this is some way we should see, including for the signage and also to short-term rentals. And there's so many factors involved these short-term rentals in terms of business perspective and in terms of property perspective, in terms of impact and in the neighborhoods and between neighbors. I truly believe we need to be really careful. So I appreciate the intention. I support the intention for the transparency, but look at the impact, the answers are legal and the city administration's answers to the to address the concerns. And I do have hesitation and to go that far. So at this point, and I will hold on this and see what's to listen and keep open-minded to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Paquette, your questions on the main motion, right? I believe that's what was indicated. And Councillor Tang, are you speaking to this amendment?
No, just to the main motion.
Okay. All right. Then hearing no other questions or speaking to the amendment, we'll call the question on the amendment. I'm in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Jans. We have all the votes.
Please display the votes. Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Next, we will go to the main motion. And Councillor Paquette, you were on the board for questions of the main motion.
Yes, that's correct.
Go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you very much. So I understand what is trying to be accomplished. I just can't help but wonder if there's deeper questions here that would be more effective. Obviously I'm not on the committee. I can't vote. but because these are just to prepare amendments and not the actual amendments, I can see that there is a place for more communication and debate about this. Do I have that right to administration?
Correct. So we would bring back options to committee, not options, but the actual amendments to committee, and those would be voted on to pursue to move on to council.
Okay. Now, I guess my question would be, and I understand that committee would like to resolve this today. So, there isn't really a lot of other options on the floor at the moment. So, in the interim, between this motion and the amendments that come before council, what is the opportunity and leeway to introduce a few more questions? Would that just be a motion from a councillor to explore some other options as far as designations and more of the legal questions that could help solve the root of these issues? Is that the recommended course there?
Councillor, if it is the will to do something different that's ahead of us in this motion, either another motion or amendment to the motion would be the correct course of action.
All right. Well, I'm not able to do that, so I would probably have to come in council. So, yeah, I absolutely understand the intent here. I am concerned a little bit that I'm a little concerned about the potential effectiveness, and maybe I can get maybe some feedback from administration on that.
I think as we prepare these amendments, we'll also prepare an analysis as to their impacts, and that will be shared when we bring them forward.
Okay, fair enough. All right, I appreciate that. Those are all my questions, and I will just telegraph now that I am working on a set of maybe more legalistic ways to approach this, not in terms of courts, but just in how we designate these short-term rentals. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay. I'll just look to the clerk. All the wording is correct on the motion?
As far as I know.
Excellent. Okay,
If the
good.
committee's happy, we're happy.
Good. We got those two amendments in. Okay. Councillor Tang, you're on the board to speak or questions?
Speak.
Okay. Hearing no further questions from my colleagues, we'll now move to speaking to the motion. Councillor Tang, do you want to go first?
Sure, if no other committee members are signing on right now.
Go ahead and I'll be there to close, so.
Okay, great. So I just want to thank the committee's initiative here for this motion. And I want to appreciate all the residents and some of the industry representatives for coming forward and sharing your perspective as well. Like I mentioned, this isn't the first time I've heard about some of the more problematic short-term rentals at the neighborhood level. And I have to say, in the past, it has been really difficult for us to help residents navigate the process. Hence why over a year ago, I contributed to the wording of the motion that led to the current discussion. I think short-term rental, they are really important for creating options for accommodations within a tourism industry. I think a lot of people probably in this room, when you travel somewhere, have probably looked at short-term rental as an option, whether or not you ultimately went there. But I do think, some of the more problematic operators have created have soured all the apples for everyone. And I will say, we have already started some of the conversation with administration on specific properties, and I will circle back to the residents on that. But I think some of the measures here we'll get, I think we'll address some of the problems that we're actually trying to solve. I have seen over the last 4 years, short-term rental undermining the infill conversation, for example, while not, in real terms affecting the housing affordability, but certainly has undermined some of the work in redeveloping areas. I have seen this undermine, some of the challenges within the hotel industry that has had a hard time coming out of the pandemic. And I have seen it consistently creating nuisance in the neighborhoods. And I think we do need greater regulations. We have done this for other sharing economy like rideshare, which in my opinion has made the industry better. And so I think moving forward, exploring what options we have and being a more restrictive on some of the elements to prevent bad actors, I think is a path forward. Recognizing the cautions, and I'm sure we'll continue to have this conversation, but appreciate the committee moving this forward. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'll just move that we extend orders to 12:10 to finish this item.
Appreciated. So moved. Any questions? Any debate? Please vote on extending orders for 10 minutes or until 12:10. Pardon me. I'm a yes.
Thank you. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That is carried. Thank you. Okay, next on the board. Hey.
Tis I, committee member.
Oh, Councilor Wright, please.
Just very briefly, I appreciate the path forward here. I think it'll give us an administration time to provide sort of some more thorough analysis, data gathering, and I would expect these to come back then by Q4 2026, and look forward to that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wright. Councilor Cartmel. Sorry, Councilor Knack, pardon me. Councilor Knack's on committee.
Sure, it doesn't matter. Yeah, just very quickly, again, I echo support this. I think there's, it's been talked about now for a number of years on this term, and I don't think we've seen quite the level of action yet that with folks who are dealing with some really challenging areas. I know from Councillor Jans and Councillor Tang and Councillor Cartmel have all been raising this in their areas. They've had problem properties that haven't been being good neighbors, and so I think we need to take that sort of next step. I'm not sure if every, I think the amended version of this is better to respond to some of that. I appreciate the concerns raised by administration, but I think we need to take at least one more step into some thoughtful ways forward to address what has been an ongoing concern in a number of parts of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cartmel.
Great, thank you. I like this as it stands, but I'm disappointed that we've lost the principal residence requirement. I've seen enough of this. I've been through enough of it. I've got a pseudo hotel in the ward I represent that hides in this place, and it's got to stop. So that happened very quickly at committee. There wasn't an opportunity to for those not on committee to say that we'd rather see that go to an amendment that could have been spoken to. I would have spoken to it then. I really think that we're going to have to go in this direction. I understand the apprehension. I understand the challenges, but enough's enough. We've got to get ahead of this. So at the next opportunity that I have, I'll be talking about a bylaw amendment that talks about that principal principal residence ownership piece that eliminates the short-term whole home rental, because there's just too many problems and they're not going away. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Cartmel. I have a lot more to say, but I think right now this keeps some action on this going, and I want to thank everybody for their participation on it and moving forward. Please call the vote.
We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Next, we move to responses to councillor inquiries. None. Private reports. None. Motion pending. None. Notices of motions and motions without customary notice. Councillor Knack.
Yes, sorry, I have two. One on behalf of Councillor Stevenson, because they need to have an opportunity to, it's the last opportunity to do that. So the notice would be, on behalf of Councillor Stevenson, that administration bring forward a DC1 rezoning for the home ed properties at 9008 101 Avenue Northwest, 10125 88th Street Northwest, 10120 92nd Street Northwest, 10121 88th Street Northwest. That includes a requirement for a minimum of 20 affordable housing units for consideration at a future public hearing. And I have one other that is hidden on me here. Sorry, I just need to pull it up. If someone else has one, they can do it there. I just lost it. Sorry. There it is. Sorry, I have it now. That administration provide a report outlining key information and considerations regarding interest in pursuing the potential acquisition of a northern portion of land, Plan 0024504 Lot A.
Okay, I'll look to the clerk. Do you have both of those?
I have the wording for the second one, and I can touch base with Councillor Knack and Stevenson offline to get the wording for the first one.
Awesome. So hearing no further notices of motion, we are adjourned. Thank you everybody for your diligence.